Hi, Year 12. Unfortunately, I am absent today. So, if you can use this lesson to watch this video and follow my instructions, you'll need to pause the video at certain points as you write and as you start to do one of our practice exams. We're going to do another one of these on Tuesday and also on Thursday this week. So, today's learning intention is to recall and identify the three stages of literary conflict. Today, you'll be looking at man versus society again, and you're going to apply your knowledge of analytical writing to a practice essay. So, success criteria for this lesson, guys, is you need to plan your essay using the recommended structure, which I will touch on in a moment. You need to brainstorm three arguments that justify the thesis that you have already written for the draft introduction that we did last week. And you need to be able to construct three peel paragraphs this week in response to the practice question. You may not be writing three peel paragraphs this lesson, but you can most certainly write two, okay, in the time that's provided today. So let's just do a quick recap. This is your practice essay question at the moment. It's the same practice essay question that we were working with last week. So you are to write an essay in which you analyze the literary conflict men versus society and explain how key characters reflect this theme in the novel The Kite Runner. Now, last week, if you were in class, you know that we've already written a draft introduction, and you also, as part of that introduction, have a thesis. So the next step after you've written your introduction, and let's pretend that this is more or less the exam, okay? You will come up with a thesis, and then you need to come up with a plan for your essay. So just to recap, I want you to take out your introduction from last lesson, and I just want you to spend about a minute having a quick read of your introduction. I want you to make sure that you have these five things: that you mention the title and the author of the text, that you give me the publishing information of the Kite Runner. Have you also given us some context about the time period in which the Kite Runner was written, context of the story, of the plot of the novel, okay, who the key characters may be, any other key themes. Please don't forget when you're talking about the context and the introduction, guys, you've got your worksheets where we actually explored key themes and symbols. So people last week who were asking me, Miss, what other themes can I talk about? Please go back and look at the things that we've already done in class. And lastly, your thesis, which should be a response to the question that I just read. It must mention literary conflict, which is man versus society for this practice. And you should have also told me which two key characters you're going to use to prove that this literary conflict exists. All right. So let's move on. This is generally your essay structure. Now, note you might not have four body paragraphs. You may only have three. Because we are doing only one theme for this practice, I would suggest that you need two good examples, so two key characters or three key characters that you can talk about. If you're only talking about two key characters who represent man versus society, listen carefully. I think that you would need to say an introduction. You would need to write body paragraph 1, man versus society, and it might be Amir is your first character. You would then need a second paragraph on Amir, okay, at year 12 level. So 2 paragraphs per character that you are discussing if you're only doing 2 characters. If you're doing 3 characters, then it's a little bit not easier, but I guess there's the option for you to do a paragraph on one character, a paragraph on a second, and a paragraph on a third character. But note that your paragraphs might be a little bit longer, okay? Remember, at year 12 level, we want around about 8 to 10 sentences per paragraph. That's including quotes. Some of you might have a couple of extra sentences in there, okay? So generally, we're stacking up our burger. The introduction and the conclusion are your buns, and these are your body paragraphs. Okay, so when you are writing this exam next week, here's the structure that we're looking for. So you know you've got your introduction. In your body paragraphs, we're still following Peel. Point, elaboration, your evidence, your explanation of that evidence, the quote that you use, and then linking to your main point sentence. Remember I said though, guys, if you've got 2 quotes per paragraph, which is what I want you to have, that you will put in your evidence, you'll explain the evidence, then you'll put in your second piece of evidence, and then you'll explain that piece of evidence, and then you will link. I'm going to show you a paragraph in a moment that does that reasonably well. Then you have your conclusion, which is a summary of the main points. and a recap of your thesis. So I hope you're still with me so far. All right. So what you're going to do today, and I'm going to get you to pause the video in a second, Year 12, is you're going to do the writing process, step 2 and 3 today, as well as step 1 and 2 we will revise. So you've already done this. You've already highlighted the keywords in the question, and you've broken down the question. Where we need to go to from now, you've already written your introduction because I wanted us to have a go at practicing an introduction. But what you would do next in the exam, once Mr. Paul or once whoever the exam supervisor says, the exam has now begun, you have 2 hours in this exam, this is where you would start to do your plan. Please do not start writing until you have a plan. You must have a compass, and the compass is your plan. So spend 10 minutes of your 2 hours planning out your essay, pretty much like the burger that I just showed you. So what are you going to put in your introduction? You can write it out if you know your introduction, or at least give yourself the thesis, the point that you're going to prove. Put that in a little bubble, make it a mind map if you must. Then, what are you going to put in your first paragraph? Man versus society is your literary conflict for this practice exam. So, which character will you talk about first that is an example of man versus society? And then you want to also start to plan out which key quotes are you going to use in paragraph number 1. Put the page numbers down so when you're in the middle of writing, you don't have to go back and figure all this stuff out, okay? Repeat the same thing for paragraph 2 and also paragraph 3 and paragraph 4 if you also do a 4th paragraph. So what's going in each paragraph? Which characters are you writing about? What's the point that you're making about it? And what are the key quotes that support that? Okay? So, step 3 of the writing process, you want to allow yourself about an hour and 20 minutes, Year 12. Remember, your exam will be 2 hours. An hour and 20 minutes of just straight writing. And that's why it's important that you spend 10 minutes on the plan first. 9 times out of 10, people who don't plan their essays generally don't do as well as they could have. Okay? My advice is that you write your essay on every second line. Okay? And make sure that you're following your plan. Have your plan next to you on a separate piece of paper. My advice is also not to stop and think for more than 30 seconds about a particular word. If you can't think of the word at that time, underline it, put a big circle around it, and come back to it. You can always come back to it. And that helps you to be a little bit more efficient in terms of the way that you use your time. Okay? So let's have a look at a sample peel paragraph. And I'm going to break this down for you in a second. So if you remember, our structure is peel here. Okay, so team, I'm going to have a read of this student's sample paragraph. This paragraph is on man versus self. As I read, I want you just to listen and have a note or take note of the language that this student has used and how well you think they've followed what we know is the peel structure. Okay, so the student writes, a noteworthy illustration of man versus self is evident through Amir's battle of conscience. As a unique protagonist, his cowardly attitude and selfishness results in the failure of rescuing his best friend from almost being consumed by the evil peril of discrimination and Afghanistan's despair. Ultimately, this decision left Amir burdened with the guilt for the rest of his life. Rather than opting to return the favor of Hassan's virtuous actions, Amir battles with the notion of wanting to be righteous whilst protecting himself and Hassan, and consequently settles on a mindless evil act after this internal conflict. Amir reflects that I had one last chance to make a decision, one final opportunity to decide who I was going to be. I could step into that alley, stand up for Hassan the way he'd stood up for me all those times in the past, and accept whatever would happen to me. Or I could run. In the end, I ran. The shameful decision to betray a true friend and confidant for the sake of attaining his father's approval poured guilt into Amir's soul, becoming toxic poison that devoured him years later. Not only did Amir fail to shield his Div Hazara friend Hassan from Afghanistan's torture, but Amir also had the audacity to try and seek redemption for his immoral actions by encouraging Hassan to fight him after hurling a pomegranate. By hurling a pomegranate. Amir desperately exclaims, hit me back, God damn you. Here, Hosseini portrays the bitter product of the gradual development of remorse in Amir from his disgraceful actions of betrayal that ultimately led to Hassan's eternal trauma. Amir's craving for punishment demonstrates the regret he faces every day to return a forever tainted friendship. Therefore, through Amir's search for redemption, Hosseini clearly relates to the theme of man versus self, as it explicitly displays the internal moral conflict that he faces. And this act establishes a continuous battle of conscience for Amir. So I want you to pause this video and to have a read of this paragraph again, this time with your critiquing hat on. Where do you see the Peel paragraph structure? Pause this video and see if you can actually take note of where the point sentence is, the elaboration, the evidence, explanation of evidence, if that happens more than once as well, and the linking sentence. And then I want you to discuss with someone next to you as well, once you've done this, what would you grade this paragraph? An A standard, a B standard, a C standard? What has this student done well and what perhaps needs a little bit more work? So pressing pause, reread this paragraph, find Peel if there's Peel, and then take 1 to 2 minutes to discuss the worthiness of this paragraph and what you would grade it. Okay, so guys, I have highlighted here where I see Peel as a marker. So you can see here the student has their point sentence. We know in the point sentence straight away that they're going to talk about man versus self and which character. And that's probably also linked to their thesis, okay? Here you can see that they're starting to take maybe 2 to 3 sentences to give a bit of context to what the quote that they're about to use, okay? So that he talks about here the context that we need to understand what's about to happen in this quote, okay? So always give us just the context that we need to understand the quote that you've used. I've highlighted in green that this is evidence, okay? And there's quite a little bit of explanation of this evidence here as well. So 2 to 3 sentences explaining the evidence. And again, the student puts in another piece of evidence. So that's their second piece of evidence that I've highlighted in green. Another sentence or two explaining this second piece of evidence here. And then finally in blue, we have the linking sentence, which talks about man versus self, and Amir again, just like the point sentence. All right. Now, I would say that there's some parts of this paragraph where the student needed more commas. Perhaps there's a couple of adjectives that don't need to be in the sentences. They're maybe a little bit wordy or cluttered. So I'd probably say that this is maybe like a B plus in terms of language and in terms of the way that they've written their sentences. Structurally, they've used Peel beautifully, okay? And I would say that there's a good level of analysis as well. So maybe like an A minus / B plus in terms of just this paragraph overall, okay? Guys, what we're going to do now, so the writing process step 4. What I'll get you to do is pause your video in a moment when I tell you to again. And what you're going to do is you're going to engage in the writing process for me, okay? So what I would like you to do is pause the video, go back to your own thesis, okay? And we're going to be doing the writing. So step 3, the writing process. I want you to open up to a new page in your book. And it can be under your introduction, actually, if you prefer. And I would like you to write based on the plan that you have just sketched out for yourself. Write your first Peel paragraph, okay? Aim to write it on every second line if you can. This means that when you go back to edit your work, it's a lot easier to edit and to add in extra words. We're going to set the timer, or you can time yourself now, for 20 minutes, okay? Trying to write your Peel paragraph in about 20 minutes. You're going to need your novel, you're going to need the plan that you just came up with, and also you're going to need the introduction that you already wrote last week. So 20 minutes, writing your first Peel paragraph. Your time starts now. Press pause, please. Guys, now that you have written that peel paragraph, I want you to have a break from writing and we're going to do step 4. Now, you won't do this after every paragraph that you write. You'll only do this when you finish writing your entire essay. But what I want you to do now is take a break from writing and revise. So, in the revision, in the exam, this would happen right at the end when you've finished your essay. You want to spend about 10 minutes reading the entire essay again. This is where you'll also do a little bit of editing. So take out anything that doesn't make sense just by drawing a single line through it. Don't scribble and make it all pretty. You might want to rewrite anything that's confusing, or maybe you've got some unclear sentences. Draw a line through anything that you don't want to be marked and write what you mean above that. Now, if you've got to add in any extra points or elaborations, or you missed an extra sentence, just put this little caret symbol between the words where you want to add in some writing or a sentence. This is why it's important that you write on every second line, okay? And then write what you want above that. If you need to add like 4 sentences, then put that little caret symbol in and an asterisk here. And then on a blank page at the end of your essay, draw this same symbol, this asterisk here, next to what you want to insert into that section of your essay. Okay? And lastly, you might want to reorder any paragraphs. So if anything doesn't make sense, make sure as well that you number your pages on the day. This is where you might want to reorder paragraphs, but you shouldn't need to do that. So what I'd like you to do right now is reread your peel paragraph. Now, with the marker's hat on, anything that doesn't make sense, draw a single line through it. Anything that needs to be rewritten, rewrite it. Okay? Time starts now. So press pause on this video. Guys, now that you've written your peel paragraph as well, and you've rewritten some sections of it, when you're editing your final essay, so this is right at the end, remember we've only written one peel paragraph. You don't need to stop and edit after writing a peel paragraph, but today you will. You also need to check for these things: grammar, vocab, punctuation, spelling. Have I made sure that I'm only using third person? No we, no our, no I, okay? Is it clear? And my tip as well is read through your essay backwards to make finding the errors easier. You might also want to read your peel paragraph backwards just to check that your linking sentence makes sense and links to the rest of your paragraph above that. So do that for me now. Once you've finished, I want you to write a second peel paragraph and repeat these 2 steps, okay? And then you can swap your work, your 2 peel paragraphs and your introduction with someone next to you and give them feedback. So that's the end of today's lesson. That's what you need to accomplish by the end of this lesson. 2 peel paragraphs on man versus society in relation to the essay question that you have, okay? And you should have a plan. And I'm going to check all of this next lesson and we're going to talk about what we found difficult and what we found easy. Thanks, Year 12.